Check, check. It leaves your mic.
All right, it's a little after the half of the hour, so I will call us to order for the July 3rd Opioid Settlement Fund Task Force. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Strebs,
Present.
Chair Ray, Vice Chair Pro Tem Hepler,
I'm here.
Commissioner Morales, Director Rutherford,
Here.
Dr. Nettleton,
Present.
Director Bobo,
Present.
Sheriff Fuller, Sarah Green, Director Gray, Susan Davis,
Present.
Nicole Storteboom, Dr. Ford, Brenda Henry, Leroy Gray, Mr. Gladstone,
Present.
April Anders. You have 8 present.
Thank you. And we've been joined by Commissioner Morales. I also, the board last night gave some flexibility for not just the director of our DEI department, but a representative from the office. So we'll welcome Mara to be with us today, coordinator of DEI. Welcome. Would you like to give a brief, just a quick something to the group, who you are and hello?
Hello, my name is Mara. I did just start here at the county with the DEI department in April. So honored to be here and be part of this work and appreciate you all.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I did hear from Ms. Anders, who would not be present, Ms. Stordbaum, who also would not. And then I believe we did hear Dr. Ford was, so hopefully Dr. Ford will be able to join us shortly. So with that, let's move into our review and approval of the minutes. Opportunity to review and if there's any amendments, or I would entertain a motion for their approval. Moved by Director Rutherford, seconded by Mr. Gladstone. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? All right, with that, our minutes are approved. We'll move to item 4, which is public comment. So this is an opportunity for members of the public who wish to address the task force to come forward, share up to 3 minutes of comments. Please join us if you'd like.
Hi, Nancy King. I just wanted to talk about this now and not with my presentation, but it was about the discussion last month regarding trying to create a way to connect people when we had those crisis overdoses. So I had one of my harm reduction specialists kind of have conversations with individuals about what they thought, you know, like with the text messages, how they found out. Their comments were the most common way they found out was the news, and that was what they preferred. I will tell you, especially with our own house, so many people, their phones change so often, it would be hard to keep all the texts connected. And that would end up being, you know, cumbersome to trying to create a system that would allow that. So they look to the news. So especially with what happened and how things got out so fast that day, that's how they found out. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. King. Anyone else wishing to share public comment? All right, and do we have anyone online? Not usually, but we'll check.
There are no
All right,
hands
yes.
raised, Chair.
Thank you, Dina. So seeing none, we will close public comment. And that'll move us into a presentation from Ms. King from COPE Network. So again, Ms. King, if you'd like to join us at the podium. Thanks for being here today. So we're hoping that information you share will help glean some insight for one of the questions we're tasked with, which is question 9. What additional locations or access points should be considered for countywide distribution of Narcan and naloxone, vending machines, buildings, pharmacies, etc. So thank you for
Sure.
joining us.
So I do have a couple of slides with me. What you'll see up here is the list of distributions that we currently have. There are 13 boxes around Kalamazoo that we have located. The only one that hasn't actually gone out yet is Reach Sober Living, and that's going out on Friday. And then you'll also notice that what I did was kind of break down some information about the statistics that we collect when doing these boxes. So in 2023, there was 2,687 kits distributed in Kalamazoo County alone. Of those, the boxes that were 314 of those came out of the boxes. However, at that point, there were only 3 boxes located in Kalamazoo. We do also run a jail vending machine. That vending machine is to inmates exiting only, and 734 kits were distributed through them. And then our Kalamazoo harm reduction, it was 306 kits that were distributed through Kalamazoo harm reduction. So what I just pulled out were what I consider high-risk groups. Those are people who are getting access to, you know, are unhoused, they're getting quick access to naloxone, Obviously, people coming out of jail at higher risk of overdose since if they've been incarcerated for 3 days or more. And Kalamazoo harm reduction is our people who are in active use. So that's why I picked those out. And then when we look in terms of the April event, we did 4 pop-up events in that month, and we distributed 227 kits in those 4 pop-ups. When we look in terms of what we're doing today, so this is from January to May, we've currently distributed 1,474 kits. Through boxes, that's 687 kits in boxes. So you can see how much those boxes have increased. And that's just in this first couple months. Our jail rate right now is at 320 and KHR is at 179. We also started partnering with EMS, and that started in May. We're not sure if those numbers yet are fully out there, but they said they only distributed 1 kit. That's a leave behind. So in other words, when they respond to an overdose, they're able to leave behind a kit with at that overdose. We know that there's an increased risk of somebody overdosing again after an initial overdose. And so we've added 10 more boxes. So we have a total of 13 boxes currently. So to understand our naloxone kits, what those kits contain is they contain 2 doses of naloxone. They contain a rescue breathing mask, gloves, as well as information about resources. And then there's also a QR code. So there's a QR code on the box. We also put information in those as a handout that also goes through kind of a verbal or a written information about how to recognize and respond to an overdose. And there's a QR code on that. There are also QR codes on the boxes. So if somebody did not know how to respond to an overdose, they could very quickly learn on the fly, which is really kind of nice. Next slide, please. So this is a thank you for the map. So this is a map that has been put together with our current distribution of boxes, which I'll talk about in a minute about where we're looking at kind of increasing. But you can see that there are some clustered. Those clusters are really in high risk areas. So that's one thing we wanted to be able to look at. Next slide, please. So I did go through the University of Michigan Injury Prevention Center, which does have responses to EMS overdose, and you can break that down by county and by city, as well as the ME death reports to their suspected drug overdose. So I broke it down to look in terms of where we were comparatively in January to May last year to January to May this year, but also looking in terms of the whole time. Now, I thought what was interesting was breaking down based on the frequency by city. So in 2023, 305 of the total, there are 305 total overdoses in Kalamazoo. And 34 of those were in Portage. And it was, let's see the other side. In Highland Park, which is, there are 22, which I didn't know was Richland. I had to look that one up, which was kind of surprising. So that kind of like was aha. We are looking for a Portage site currently. So we're kind of exploring where we might be able to put one in Portage. We do work collaboratively with an organization to help us to oversee the inventory, be able to make sure kits are being put in the box, as well as being able to give us a monthly report so we can do our monthly report. And so we try to work with somebody who's going to collaboratively as opposed to just putting out somewhere in the community. So all the boxes that I showed you before are all collaborations that we have with organizations. When we look in terms of overdose frequency, currently in 2024, 94 of those were in Kalamazoo. And I did break down by zip code because I think that's also another important factor to be able to look at when we're understanding where those overdoses are occurring. We know there are far more overdoses than are reported. People who do have overdose kits and respond and they are revived, they don't want to call 911, possibly have police connected with them. So we know that these numbers are lower than actual overdoses in our communities. And that's why we know the more Narcan that we put out in the community, the more lives we save. So I did break it down by, for 2023 and 2024, by overdoses by city, the zip code, and then looking in terms of the number of deaths comparatively to the number of overdoses that were reported. I do have, if you're really curious, I do have additional slides that kind of are the breakdown of each of the county or each of the city locations and zip codes, but I thought that this was pretty telling of the information of what we're looking for. So what we're thinking in terms of where additional boxes, I am looking at a Western Michigan University site, that campus area, and then also looking at a Portage site. And that's where we're at right now with Kalamazoo. We have had this opportunity through the collaboration with Bronson Hospital, who has been able to donate those boxes. Cope Network also has their own individual boxes that we've been able to purchase through our grant. So we do have that, we do have more opportunities to be able to do that. Questions?
Pro Tem Hepler.
Thank you. Very informative. Would it be possible to get some of these slides so that we can see them and review them? So interested in the fact that we're seeing these now, not just in the city of Kalamazoo and Portage, but we're seeing them in Richland, Galesburg, number of places in the outer part of the county. So thank you for putting this together. Thank you.
The county does have the slides, and the additional slides on this do have, when I pulled off the actual charts of the city and zip codes for each of those, for those years, so that is able to look at the bigger picture too. Because we know that there are even more than just what I've highlighted here. These were the higher risk areas.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, we have Comstock and
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's getting lumped into the city or
So
Oshtemo
it does,
area.
yeah, it doesn't come up as the city. It doesn't come up as the township of Comstock. However, we know that 49048 falls into that area. And we do have, we did put one at the Comstock Public Library this month or last month. And then we're also looking at possibly being able to partner with Kalamazoo Public Library, putting one at the Easttown Library as well. Because we know that I mean, I'm from Comstock. That's a very high risk, very secretive community when it comes to substance use.
There we go. We have some kits available at Family and Children's Services just in our lobby area that we're distributing if asked. I did not think about tracking how many we give out. Would you like me to do that?
So if you get your kits through us, we track that for you. We do work with multiple agencies as well that also distribute kits that are not part of the box system. We do believe in training, so just putting the kits out there is important. But we also want to make sure people know how to respond correctly to an overdose, how to recognize an overdose, even how to prevent an overdose. And that's one of the key factors we talk about is the best way to prevent overdose is to keep people oxygenated, keep them up, moving around, talking, and also the risk factor of having been absent from an opioid use for 3 days or longer puts them at higher risk of an overdose. So we really do want to make sure that we're doing the education as well. We also do community-based education throughout the counties. If you look back at the first slide with the 2,000 or whatever slides or whatever kits that we distributed in Kalamazoo, a lot of that is doing trainings in the community through organizations, partnering with being able to do them in the community. So we do a lot of a variety of education beyond just putting naloxone in the boxes. And that's a really important piece that we do a lot of collaborations and are able to do that for any organization, anytime. I often network with organizations to be able to say, if you want to help me set up the training program, that's great, because then they have the resources to be able to connect with people to bring them in. So we do a lot more than just the naloxone boxes when it comes to making sure Narcan is in our community.
Mr. Glad.
Thank you, Nancy, for that always informative information that you have. For the purposes of answering our question, my suggestion would be that we make a recommendation to the board that our answer be Nancy King is a liaison, ongoing liaison for any information, up-to-date information for Narcan training and distribution in our community, and should work in conjunction with quote unquote whomever that needs to, whether it's the health department or any other branches of government, to be an information source and a liaison back and forth on an ongoing basis, because the need and locations and answering the question can change perhaps on a 6-month time frame, 8-month time frame. My recommendation is that our answer be Nancy King is the liaison for ongoing communications regarding naloxone training and distribution in our community. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gladstone. Dr. Middleton.
Yeah, and the reality is that this, for question 9, this has already happened fluidly. I mean, Nancy's partnering with multiple agencies. I know Dr. Ford has all been partnering. Kendall, our opioid educator, is going out to recovery center today and distributing dozens of kits. And so these activities are happening and are happening fluidly. And it's great because it's an example of the partnerships that exist and are currently ongoing in the community and also within our opioid coalition.
And we also do trainings twice a month at Gilmore Rehab, so that everybody going through the rehab has opportunity to learn about overdose prevention and have access to leaving with a naloxone kit as well. And that's been a partnership that's been going on since 2016.
Dr. Ford.
Is there anything that you can think of, like as far as expansion of the work that you do, either with naloxone or the other harm reduction, and maybe even specifically about syringe exchange, that you think some of the opioid settlement money could expand your services, like eventually as we go, forward and advise the commissioners? I think it'd be interesting to hear if there's anything in particular, any gaps that you think could be filled if you had more funding. Give us your wish list.
Interestingly, I could do a whole.
Ms. King, if I might
Yes.
just interject here. The intention of our Board of Commissioners, I believe, will be to appoint Ms. King at our next board session to join this task force and to have more in-depth session. So we have some constrained time
Sure.
today, so I'm going to just kind of bring us, it's a good question, but I'm just going to bring us back to this discussion around our boxes today. So I have just a couple questions. Just my ignorance here. Box and vending machine, is that a synonymous
So
term? Is there a
yes,
difference?
originally, when a lot of this started, it started off with vending machines. Like, we have an actual physical vending machine at the Kalamazoo County Jail. Those are cumbersome, they're expensive, they need electricity, and all of those are challenges to putting those out. I believe it was, it's been a lot of other harm reduction communities that kind of came up with the newspaper box concept. So these are physical boxes, like an old newspaper box, that are outside in a building, outside of a building. And that to us was very important, because we know people who are going into buildings have resources, are more likely to get connected to naloxone, or organizations that have them are able to give them to them as well. It was those who aren't connected to those resources that are at very high risk. And that's why the naloxone boxes out there are very important. We do, as I said, collaborate, because we don't just, typically I bring about 50 kits per organization. They're responsible for overseeing that inventory, putting a few out at a time so people don't go, oh, there's so many, and taking them all. We also have people who don't believe naloxone should be available, and will take them and throw them away. So this is why that collaboration is a very important part to all of that. So we want to be able to understand that most of them that we have are just like the newspaper box style. We have 2 different styles out there. One that's called the Barney, because it's a big purple thing. And the other one is the white newspaper boxes that have been donated through Bronson Hospital.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, because my other question would have been if access was outside for after hours. And I've just potentially just ideas that I'm sure the coalition is discussing, but you mentioned the public library, so Portage Public Library. I believe the ISK is also working on launching some additional satellite offices within the county, and so that might be another opportunity of a location for staging, some as well, just to elevate. Were there any other questions? Ms. Henry?
So recently I've been talking with the Family Health Center. trying to figure out how we could maybe put a box there. And so
They
you,
have their pharmacy, that's why we don't have a box there. As far as the north side is concerned, we just put one at the NACD. And we're looking at possibly not one, but that's why there's not a box there and there was a stipulation, because we've looked into it through with Bronson, was because they have a pharmacy there.
that's what I was told also, that they do the prescription. So my question is, like, for someone that is not a part of the family health center like myself, right? I have a home on the north side. If I wanted to walk to the family health center because it's 2 blocks away, or I'm a parent of an individual that used drugs within my house and I found them OD'd in my house, how do I access that and I'm 2 blocks away without having to see a doctor? And I think the family health center is a viable place really for one of those boxes to be placed. And I understand the barrier there. But thinking of an ideal of maybe collaborating at a deeper level so that maybe we can get a box there, because during the evenings and nighttime, they can't get in. I can't get in the family health center. I can't get in the NACD office. As a parent or a relative, I have no access.
The NACD box is an outside box. It was just placed this month, so it's right in the corner of North and
Park Street.
Yes,
Okay.
yep. And there are there are 2 locations that we've been looking at also. So yeah, all the boxes are outside, accessible 24/7.
Except for the family health center.
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
on them, but that doesn't mean that there's not another location near that area that we could collaborate with.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cherry.
Thank you, Chair. Just to that point, what about the store across the street, Lessman's? Is that an option to put a
So
box
that
there?
is a possible option, and I did talk with Gwendolyn Hooker about being able to monitor that box. We want to make sure that when we have that collaboration, that there's a consistency in staff to make sure it is not just stocked, but also reported, because we have our reports that we have to do too. So that's that consistency factor of making sure when we have that collaboration, we can have that consistency. But that has been location discussed. Yes.
Thank you. So is NACD the only box on the north side?
Correct. Right now, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
We had been looking at also collaborating with Powell Library, but that's on hold.
Well, that's about to go into NACD across the street.
Yes,
so
exactly.
it defeats the purpose.
Can I make another comment? Or for there is another state level source for organizations that want either a newspaper style box or a vending machine, and that's michiganopen.org, michigan-open.org. So you can apply there, like you could work with Family Health Center to apply for one. And if they want to do that outside of this pharmacy, they've said no because they have a pharmacy, but you're so right. It just needs to be accessible. I love the one we have at the WMed clinics because it's in the Circle Drive. You can just walk by the island. You can drive your car up and grab it out, whatever. And that's on Oakland Drive. But, we need it that accessible everywhere. So, but that is a good resource at state level that is another option.
And the clinic on Oakland Drive probably has been our largest distribution in any given time. The first month that we put out there, they went through 110 kits in like 2 weeks. At the WMU clinic on Oakland Drive.
Cherry.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
So the WMed clinic also has a pharmacy. So what's the workaround to get it there?
It's something to do with Family Health Center.
Okay.
So it's their protocol.
If I could just comment briefly, in doing this work, that I've never felt the stigma that we talk about at every meeting so much. And we got these 20 boxes. We're working with Nancy. We've approached multiple healthcare different places that don't want these boxes and they have a reason for it. And so this is where public education comes in, you know, all of it, but also for our leaders at places in our community that just, they don't want it. They don't want people that are going to pick it up, but everybody should have this. This is like something everyone should have access to in their house. So that we have a lot of work to do in Sigma in this specific regard.
And it's interesting because there's some of the comments where they were afraid that people would be like, come to the box and overdose. You know, like I'm overdosing, so I'm going to this box, and they would overdose at the location, not understanding that, first of all, they can't administer it to themselves. You know, and so it's a misunderstanding of, you know, that access of why this is an important box. It is not bringing people who you might not want. No, they're there anyhow because it does not know any barriers whatsoever.
Chair Swift.
Yes.
And maybe a point of clarification too, there may be some stipulations from the source of the naloxone as well. So for example, for source of naloxone from the state of Michigan, you know, one of the stipulations I believe is not to replace existing resources that your organization may already have. So for example, putting a box within a physical location where there is already a pharmacy, you know, that's under the standing order from the chief medical executive from the state of Michigan. So there has to be this delineation of resources and physical location when using certain resources. And that may be one of the considerations. I'm not sure, but outside versus inside, that's a detail that I don't have off the top of my head, but I do believe that is a stipulation from at least the state of Michigan.
Yeah, we're willing to partner. Like I said, it's the collaboration that's really key to making sure that this is getting handled in a way that is supportive and not just put a box out there and then it goes empty for, you know, weeks at a time because it wasn't being taken care of. And I could tell you, taking care of those boxes could be a full-time job.
Well, thank you for that work and for your presentation. Do we have any other direct questions on this presentation at this time? Right. Thank you, Ms. King. Appreciate
And I
it.
could do a whole thing on harm reduction for another day.
Yes.
Thank
Well,
you.
Yes, we'll have that opportunity. Thank you. All right. So let's bring ourselves to item 6, additional discussion. So on question 9, we have a recommendation made by Mr. Gladstone. Are there other thoughts that we want to elevate to help, you know, glean or have included within our recommendations or report back to our board? So, and again, the question 9 is about how, are there additional locations or access points that should be considered countywide for the distribution of Narcan and Naloxone?
One
Dr.
other
Ford.
access point would be, we've distributed them a little bit, would be primary care offices, having it available in every primary care office is like health maintenance. So that's an environment, not just in a box form, but so we've given them practice social workers, for example, at some of the Bronson offices, but not all yet. But I think that's an access point that we're not fully utilizing.
What about in that same lines, the sort of like immediate care providers as well, right? So those non-emergency locations. Other thoughts to elevate? Dr. Nelson, you look like.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the source of naloxone and a community-based organization versus healthcare. If the sources come from MDHHS, I think I have to look at that paperwork again, but it's ringing true as I think about it out loud, and however that's defined.
Dr. Ford.
And then what could we make it more of a school, like partnering with schools? I think, you know, getting it out there is something that's safe. And so schools would, I don't know, just another thought, like other community organizations and more interactions than the boxes we need those too, but.
Ms. King is asked to chime in. You can come forward and go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so we do partner with schools. We do educate schools and make sure they have naloxone available in the school in case that there is an overdose, and help them to understand what the ramifications are, what they have to do in order the state protocol for them to be able to keep that in. So we partner with multiple schools in Kalamazoo to be able to do that. We've also had resistance from a lot of schools. You know, they don't want to think that it happened. I help to educate them that it may not be a student that's overdosing, but it could be a situation where they're doing an event. It could be conferences, it could be anything, and a family member or somebody in the community who's there that overdoses, that they would be able to respond. So we are continuously working on trying to help to do that education, and that does, we do also training with them to make sure they know how to respond correctly. And I always ask them to invite any staff, because we know, substance use affects 1 in 3 families. Statistically, that there are staff there who are experiencing this, and it helps them to be able to become educated. And then they can also get their own personal kit beyond what we would distribute for the school itself.
It just brought to my mind, whether or not the schools would be open to newspaper box, rather than just having it within their infrastructure. But it elevated to me then thinking about the events that happen at schools, but also in the community. So like locations like the Growlers or Wing Stadium or other places where populations gather together and people maybe would need it or see an opportunity to get access. And
we actually did a training at Wing Stadium to make sure that they had naloxone. We do a lot of organizational training so that they have naloxone in their organization for incidences that would occur, not just for them to be able to give out to participants or clients that are there, but for them to respond with naloxone.
Mr. Gladstone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is reminiscent to me of when they started putting defibrillators in first aid kits for big facilities that have a, facility first aid kit. And they started putting defibrillators in them because it became a standard piece of equipment to have in case someone has a heart attack. And my hope is that in the long term, that Narcan will be looked at in the same way, that it is an emergency item that should be included in a facility first aid kit in all places, and not have to be this this stigmatized thing where we're attracting those people again. Don't get me started down that rabbit hole, but we don't want those people in our neighborhood and all of that. It should be a standard item, and my hope is that eventually it will become a standard item in first aid kits and allowed in facilities with open arms, as they did with defibrillators for a heart attack. Thank you.
You will find a naloxone kit in every defibrillator here in the county buildings. And also Western Michigan University just started that too. So I'm been trying to access, because I got a call saying, hey, we have this naloxone with our defibrillator, but we don't know how to use it. So it's like, okay, training opportunity. So yeah, it's starting. But again, it's also making sure that people are aware and that how to use it. So important. So.
Hopefully with our ongoing work with these opioid funds, we help address that stigma existing in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, any other comments? I'm going to move us along to then 6B, which is question number 5. So want to dialogue around whether the county should consider 1-year or multi-year funding request proposals. So when we get down to the point where they're doing grant awards or RFP process, what do we think is the most effective time frame in which the funding should go out? So like these are annual requests that organizations need to make. Would we like to see cyclic funding that happens 2-3 years, or combination of funding approaches? What are our thoughts? Mr. Gladstone.
Thank you. That was, you just said it. That was going to be my question, is why can't we have both 1-year, perhaps, and 2-year and 3-year grants, depending on the size and scope of the project? One of the things I brought up in previous meetings, and I think it's in our notes, is that we want to create low barrier, easy access funding to small grassroots organizations that don't have grant writers or sophisticated reporting abilities. So we want to create the low barrier stuff, but there also may be longer term projects. I think it's limiting us to say we're going to sit here and just do a 2-year grant or we're going to do a 1-year grant. I think we ought to look at a matrix of combinations. So would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Director Willow.
I support that. I think working with a lot of grants myself in the government, there are situations where a process is envisioned by a grantee that looks at a longer term. And I think it would behoove the board to be able to look at a long term with maybe a 1-year report and a internal renewal, but yet the board's able to budget down the road instead of every year coming back and wondering where we are on a 1-year cycle. So I would do a 1-year for some grants or 3-year if necessary, depending on the scope of the project.
Thank you for that. Yes, Director.
I too support the concept of potentially, singular or multi-year grants based upon the project that is identified in the RFP. I do like the idea from a standpoint of management that it's in a cycle and it can be fiscal calendar, but there's just some level of, I guess, process there. And I know that I get accused of being too process oriented, but just from a management standpoint, I think there's some value in that. The other, I think, consideration is too, I think it would behoove the county if there was some allocation of resource throughout the year so that if something does occur that we need, emergency funding for, that's readily available. Obviously, the board would have, the approval mechanism, but just to be able to have that resource budgeted, again, in the event of short-term emergency needs, I think there would be some benefit to that.
Commissioner Pro Tem Hepler.
Thank you, Chair. I too agree with the concept of a either 1 year or multi-year, depending on the scope of the project that's being potentially rolled out. I also want to make sure that there is matrix in there that is going to show us that these are being successful or not successful, so that we can, because this is limited funding. There's not a boatload of it. It's going to be limited. So we need to make sure that in these funding requests, there's a matrix to make sure it's being successful, so that we can point it to where it is being successful. Thank you.
Mr. Gladstone.
Thank you. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to discuss it, but I'll just remind folks that I had mentioned also previously that we should look into creating some sort of an investment endowment type fund with a portion, clear for the minutes, a portion of the opioid settlement funds, so that there will be money in perpetuity on an ongoing basis. And I have checked with some other folks around the state and region and had this discussion. And the state of Michigan is doing that, looking into it. There's other states, other counties that are looking into investment funding. So I don't have the legal language in front of me, but it seems to me that others are doing it and we are able to do it without being a lawyer and going through the documents specifically. But we should consider peeling off a portion of all of these funds and investing it so that we don't have a limited amount of money. The big chunk will be limited, but there'll be some money in perpetuity that could be an indefinite investment that could be thrown off. Thank you.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing from us is a mix of timelines of funding, the benefit of a multi-year cycle, which reduces some of the, I think when we're, granting out to community-based organizations, for example, just the timeline of the contracting, the staff, identifying the staff to implement the programming, and then into implementation, you're nearly through like a year already. So, but also being able to have some flexibility for maybe a dedicated portion of funding or a contingency fund set aside with additional approaches for some long-term growth on funds. Okay. And we can have some future discussion on that. Looking at our time, I'm gonna, I think at this point, move us on to the next one, to 6C, which is question 4. And here we're really asked to ponder what sort of timeline will the county operate on when we're thinking about when it is we release funding opportunities in the community. So we're thinking about, you know, say we have a grant portal, when would we want to open that during the year? Is there alignment with other sort of funding cycles that are occurring now in the community that we should be aware of, that maybe we want to work in concert with, or work at a different time to not overburden people? What would that look like?
I do know that I think looking at some of the other, like the foundations or that cycles, because sometimes those can be very overwhelming times for organizations. I know that from experience when there are deadlines with those foundations and some of them happen at very similar times. Maybe looking at when those occur and maybe varying a little bit from that, as well as I also know, you know, many entities operate on a fiscal year and not a calendar year. So how might that play in also?
A lot of the foundations, it's October is the grant cycle for them, is that correct?
Yeah, I
Okay,
know
that'll be-
we just had a lot submitted in, I think, March, April. And I know there is another round, I think, coming up in October.
The county's budget cycle, we operate on a calendar year. We do the budgeting sort of in September, but becomes effective in January. Mr. Gladstone?
Just a quick point of information is typically spring and fall, you find a lot of grant cycles, because I know from what I've done in the nonprofit community, oftentimes we're applying, some applications are going in, you know, as of a month ago, and then there'll be another round in the fall. And I think some of them operate on a fiscal year rather than a calendar year. Whereas the county, you just said, operates fiscally on a calendar year. I would like to back up and ask a quick question. I know that the commission peeled off a portion of the funds to be looked at for immediate distribution for, you know, urgent needs, which is great, because we do have, you know, some organizations that could do something right, you know, right now. Wondered what the status was on that. And then a quick statement would be that we need to work diligently to figure out how to get this started, because I think, you know, the process, from what I heard from our deputy administrator, is that it's going to take several months to get things rolling anyway. So I know I threw out a lot there, but what's going on with the county would be my first
Yeah.
question.
The initial allocation is still in discussion, looking through opportunities of who would help to administer that. Administration will come back to us with a report, I think, hopefully at our next meeting. And in their update at the end of our time here, maybe you'll have a bit more on that for us. Any other thoughts, Ms. Henry?
So with some of the grants that I've been looking at, it's just not from October or fiscal, but during the year, there's several that say if you need $10,000 or less, we're able to apply. And I know it's limited money and it's released at certain times, but sometimes smaller organizations, sometimes we just need $15,000. And maybe at some point during the year, you know, you're saying, well, there's only like $45,000 available. And if you're under 10,000 or 15,000, you can apply at this time. So some of the grants do allow us to go in and do that. And then some of them are fiscal.
Director Bobo?
Thank you, Sheriff. I would advocate leaving the portal open all year round and maybe having quarterly letting cycles, so that as people have needs, they don't have to wait and rush, and the portal's flooded once or twice a year, but they can put them in, they can queue up, and then I'm assuming a subcommittee from the board will be able to look at those quarterly and make recommendation, which also ties in with what Ms. Henry is saying and what Director Rutherford said. That allows requests to be made throughout the year, PRN, not just a one-time for the year. And then the board obviously can make the recommendation, well, you're 6 months into the year, so we'll fund you for 6 months, and then we'll look at it again. My 2 cents.
Thank you for that suggestion. Did you? Yeah.
I appreciate Ken's comments relative to, you know, an open portal, but the important thing is certainly to have that as a, particularly as we talk about that emergency need scenario. But there too, it's important for this group to be able to kind of develop those buckets of focus based upon the meetings that we've had henceforth, coupled with input from the other opioid coalition group, as well as the needs assessment, but really so that we're directional and intentional with the resource. And it's thought out, well planned and developed. But even if at some point in time, and what I was talking to Dr. Nettleton about was the feasibility of at some point in time when we're ready to have someone come in and help facilitate a process of really getting those buckets on a whiteboard and then allocating maybe a percentage of resource to those, you know, harm reduction, all of those buckets up on the wall, and then determining here's our recommended, you know, allocation of resource, and then developing the RFPs accordingly. Some of those RFPs are going to be long-term. Some of them, you know, particularly when we want to get, you know, upstream and into the mental health element of it, it's going to be long-term. Some are going to be shorter term, but, you know, the outcome of that is again, going to develop, you know, those RFPs. And going back to Commissioner Hepler's comments relative to, you know, there does need to be a quality assurance component built into the RFP so that people know that when they apply, that there's monthly or quarterly, you know, annual reporting, that, you know, we just want to make sure that those entities are doing the job that they've indicated that they're going to do.
Mr. Gladstone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good point on the RFP. That leads me to another question. Who's going to write the RFP? I have seen government-written RFPs, and they can be quite daunting. I think we need somebody, at least on the RFP committee, or part of the meetings, even if it's a health department meeting with writing this, whiteboarding this. They need to have somebody like a Brenda Henry or somebody who's on the other end in the room saying, this is the nightmare I've gone through trying to do this, that, and the other thing. Can you make it easier in that area? Having somebody like a Pam Coffey who runs Healthy House, or a Gwendolyn Hooker who runs Hope Through Navigation, those kind of people, somebody like that should be on the RFP committee in the room saying, here's the nightmares, let's try to avoid them. Because really my end goal is trying to get this to the smaller organizations that don't have a chance at money. Just to throw that out there, when that process starts, we need to make sure there's some people at the table that can contribute and make it easier. Thank you.
Commissioner Morales.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess I don't know if I remember us being in the RFP process once we award something. So how is that gonna look? I don't know if that's a Deputy Smith question. If we've ever had board members in the RFP process when we're awarding.
PD Administrator.
Yeah, so right now we're using the term RFP process, which is one term we can use, but what y'all are most familiar with is our grant application portal that we use through Amply Fund. I don't know if this is appropriate time or not, but those are documents that I have drafted. I'm happy if part of this task force would like to look at those documents that have been drafted. It's the application, the scoring matrix, the quarterly report, the budget template, and the performance metric template. Those are documents I'm happy to distribute if that's something that the task force would like to continue to move on. Our intent would be to use our Amply Fund system, or that I should step back and say, right now, that has been the thought process that I have had. If y'all are wanting to go through an RFP process, it's very similar. We just call it a grant application process, and we use Amply Fund as the portal. So that's kind of where we are, and just kind of throwing that out there as the update.
Commissioner Morale.
Thank you. So with that, I'm most familiar with the Amply Fund. It's an easier process. So if we go that route, did you want to, when she sends a set of, questions out, did you all want to look at those questions and see what best fits within your work that you do? Would that be something that?
Because we spoke about this, I think like a month or so ago, about having the documentation so that we could look at them and look at the scoring method in which would be used. And so that would allow us to see that and not have to create something new if that's more feasible to use. So I would like to see a copy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thank Deputy Administrator for her work on these drafts, and we will share them with the task force and allow opportunity for feedback. I have Chair Ray, and then we'll go to Dr. Nettleton.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my concern with that, as far as like this body looking at the questions and the scoring matrix and all of those things, does that create a conflict when it's time to apply for the money? When folks on this committee ultimately will apply for the funding? So is there another body we should have, or another committee we should have looking at the RFP questions in the scoring matrix? Like, I don't know, what does that look like? Because we can create an application that's gonna make me score 100%, and then I apply and I'm awarded 100% of the funding. So it's not an equitable process.
Yeah, I think that there's valid concern there. I think if we take it to other body like the Opioid Coalition, there it's even more people who would be applying for the funding, and that maybe is more opportunity for greater feedback from a number of organizations. So I do think we have to be mindful, and the goal there is making it, most effective and efficient for people who need to apply. Dr. Nettleton.
The point that was raised by Chair Ray was the one I was going to raise as well. And so I don't live in this world. I'm down in that. But
Congratulations.
There's the yin and the yang over here.
Salt, pepper.
Salt and pepper as well. Yes. But that's the question that comes up. And there may be, I guess I was going to raise the point of maintaining that objective integrity for whatever process is developed. And maybe there's a way to have general principles be evaluated as opposed to specifics. And then there are ways to do that. And there are other counties, and the Michigan Association of Counties could also be a resource to say, hey, what have other counties done as a resource when this question has come up?
Commissioner Morale.
Good points brought up. So with that, as we look over the questions, maybe just get some input, and then if we need to tweak whatever Deputy Smith has in place to, keep them on the outskirts, so it isn't a conflict of interest as far as the board goes. But maybe maybe put a survey out, or a Survey Monkey or something, to see what may additionally needs to be added. I'm not sure how much more we could, reach the larger masses, but maybe I'll just keep it at that, because I do want this to be an equitable process. In some instances, we're already being biased with the recommendations that, we've named today, not biased in a bad way, but with folks that we already know that we could count on, where people can say, hey, those are the usual suspects, I'm not being considered. So I don't want to get into that, whirlwind with that, but I'm cool with you sending the materials out, and then maybe we review it and just get some feedback. So
What I think is that feedback would be valuable. It's then taken into consideration, not necessarily implemented, or, it's an advisement. That's what this body is here to do, is to advise. I want to be mindful, we are to the last 4 minutes of our time. I know Deputy Administrator has got a hard stop for us, but I see also a number of comments that want to be made, so we can make them concise so that we can give Deputy Administrator an opportunity for her update before she needs to leave. Director Bubble.
Thank you. I just want to concur with Commissioner Morales. I think that it's been done. She's put the work into it. It's a template out there. It's a format we can start with. And we have a lot of different small and large bodies. And with that, I think we're going to be able to vet it at a fairly high level. If there needs to be a second level vetting, we can do that.
Director Rutherford.
Yeah, I agree too, and I appreciate the consideration for that. I think that, you know, if we do a good job notifying the availability of the funding to everybody in the community, then people that have an interest will apply. And I think at the end of the day, the commissioners are the ones that make the final award granting. So, you know, that's the best that you can do, and you know, in a community that, you know, every community is encountering, you know, the same situation.
Thank you, Director Rutherford. So I'm going to move us to administrative updates with Deputy Administrator Smith.
Yes, and I'll just add to that. So what I'm hearing is I am going to email out those documents to everyone on the task force. And just know I am not married to them. So if you have edits, please feel free to make those edits or suggestions. They are pulled from what I've seen other counties do and also across other states as well. I will also provide a couple of resources to y'all. I'll email out Nancy's slides from today. There are a couple of resources that Commissioner Straps has passed along to me, so I'll get those emailed out as well. So this will be a lengthy email, so please read it. And then lastly, Calhoun County did release their application this week for their opioid settlements. I looked at their application, it's posted online. It is very similar to what you're going to be seeing from me as well. I think technically speaking, we have a few less questions, and I think they maybe had 15 questions. So what I have so far is very similar to what they have, maybe technically a few less. So hopefully that meets the need for the low barrier. And then just a quick update, because the question was posed about the 250,000 that the board has already said that they would like to get out there for immediate needs. I do have a meeting in July, and I will be able to provide an update to y'all and the commissioners in August. Oh, sorry. And one last thing, I do want to make note, we didn't talk about it today. Kind of loosely we did, but I have provided those budget scenarios for y'all. I heard the conversation today that we do want multi-year and annual ongoing and some contingency and also investment. I really ask that y'all please look at that. I do have our accountant that's overseeing our opioid settlement funds here with me today. I can have her at the next meeting as well. I think that will also help and be beneficial as we're looking at those decisions of really narrowing in on that bucket of money, because those scenarios are very different depending on which direction you want to go, on what available funding is out there, which may lead y'all to decide how frequently you want to do grant applications. So please just take a look at that and also the draft report that I have so far. So again, lengthy email coming to you next week.
Thank you so much, Deputy Administrator. I know we lean on you quite a lot in this work, so you're appreciated so much. I'm going to back us up because I moved past an agenda item so that we could get our update from Administrator Smith, but I want to talk about meeting frequency. So we're meeting monthly. We have a constrained time. We're here just an hour, which sort of, you know, truncates a bit of the dialogue. And I'm wondering if there's availability or you know, agreement in the body to consider meeting more often, or how else we advance the work between our monthly meetings so that we're getting to a point where we get a process moving for the community. What are thoughts? Would we want to consider meeting bi-monthly, like every 2 weeks? We want to stick to monthly schedule. What's our preference availability, Dr. Douglason?
I think more frequency makes it more challenging for scheduling. If this is already on our calendars and the board, this body wants to have more, and maybe extending the duration of the meeting may be the easiest thing to do.
If we could maybe add like 30 minutes, take an hour and a half long meeting.
Yeah. We have. You want to do that, or every 2 weeks, Commissioner Morales?
I definitely don't want to do multiple meetings, but, I mean, and we may not need the whole hour and a half. As long as, you know, like this is concise for me, and then everything else we can do via email or, you know, just getting the work done like, Deputy Smith mentioned, just some, you know, some hard reading. I just don't want to be here, just meet, and we can handle things over email or, you know, communicating with you as chair over a phone call.
Other thoughts? So I'm hearing kind of two, we consider a little more time, or we keep with it as it is. What's the
A little bit more
consensus?
time, because we have a lot on our calendars. We have online meetings, we have in-person meetings. So just to have the meeting to go as long as we need to within that half hour, maybe an extra 15 minutes works better for me than to try and get it somewhere else in between.
So what about this I mean, we may not need the whole hour and a half if we schedule it that way. Are we open to that as a body to look at our next month that will convene from 11:30 until 1 o'clock? Sounds doable. Great. Thank you all for your feedback. Any other items that need to be elevated today? Dr. Nelson?
Just, this is maybe for Deputy County Administrator Smith to look into, but whether or not the Supreme Court ruling for a specific opioid settlement, Purdue Pharma, whether that affects Kalamazoo County or not, or if it's an ongoing litigation issue.
Exciting to explore more of the Supreme Court's work. Thank you for that. Do we have anything else? All right.
Just
Thank
a
you all. Oh, yes.
Quick,
Mr. Gladstone.
quick comment. I can't see your name tag from here. Is that Marissa? You're the accountant who's responsible for keeping track of all this? I'd like us to take note of the color of her hair, which is brown now, and it'll be gray in another 2 years based on the amount of accounting that needs to be done for this multi-year matrix of numbers. Bless you on that work. Thanks.
I bet she's someone who loves numbers, though, I would bet. Thank you, Marissa. All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.